The most common issues we see with runners, this is actually pretty common with any athlete, is we see an anterior dominance. We're all primarily anterior dominant because of a world where we're typing, where we're on our phone, or whether we're walking. Okay, walking necessitates a knee forward bend, putting stress on the anterior portion of the body. So the anterior side needs to be able to stabilize, so we actually are working from that. But that doesn't mean we can't create a more equal playing side here. The problem with our world at this point is that we're evolving to sit in this position, which is hip flexion, knee flexion. That hip flexion shortens the hip flexors. When the hip flexors get shortened, they become overactive. So when we go to stand after sitting for prolonged periods of time, we get glued down. And one of the big things that happens from being glued down, if I grab the skin on the front here, so I'm stealing this from Dr. Kelly Starrett, is we can't necessarily stand all the way, okay? Because the hip flexors are being pulled on and it's uncomfortable. So to make up for that, watch my back, is my back will compensate. So I'm making a spinal fault. So I'm not understanding how to actually move from a more optimal position, which right now what I'm doing is I'm using my glutes or my hips to activate and actually shut down my hip flexors, because if my glutes are on, my hip flexors will shut off. Agonist, antagonist. This is how this works, right? It's the same concept of if I curl or I do a bicep curl, my tricep shuts down, okay? If I do a tricep extension, my bicep shuts down. Now, if I'm in an eccentric loading phase, it's a different story, but the fact is this is how the mechanics work on this. Now, the issue with this is that when I am hip flexor dominant and we run, when I get into a position of running like this, when I pull, I tend to pull out the back. And when I pull out the back, I don't pull underneath my hips with my hamstrings, okay? So, pulling out the back, tight hip flexors. I don't activate the hip. I'm pulling here, and then I pull through with my hip flexors. So it's a chopped up motion in running, where as I pull up, I'm lagging behind, and when I do that, I have to compensate through unbalanced. Okay? So as I'm unbalanced, right, I then pull through with my hip flexors, which puts me out in front of my body. Versus, if I'm pulling well, I pull up to underneath my hip. And this is me using my hamstrings to a large degree, okay? But as I land, regardless, I need to have an active hip. And if I land closer underneath my body, my hip gets active much sooner versus my quadriceps out front. Now, whether I'm landing on my ball foot or not, it matters to a degree, but I'm still putting on the parking brake up front. So when we see people who heel strike, we already know pretty much that they are not pulling correctly. And the heel strike is nothing more than a byproduct of me using an overactive hip flexor complex to pull. So when I pull forward my hip flexors, which creates a whip out in front, regardless of how big that whip is. Okay? So slower running would be here, poorly, to I pull and drop. Okay? So, again, slower running and a poor pull with anterior dominant, okay, is I pull here and then I'm forward. The correct way would be I'm here and I pull and my foot drops underneath me and I am allowed to continue to move forward versus putting on a parking brake, which just loads up my anterior chain again, okay? So this also relates into, like I was discussing, the back compensating. Most runners, including myself, have dealt with overextension issues where I'm compensating for my tight hip flexors by making it up through my back, which we're making a quarter extremity violation, okay? Which means I have to compensate through my extremities to make up for the lack of stability through my spine, okay? So if I've got a stable spine, my hips actually work, I'm actually gonna wanna pull underneath my hip and let that foot drop normally. Okay, so the overextension becomes a big problem, and some of the easiest signs we understand with overextension are standing positions like this. I'm shifting over, I'm turning my foot out into external rotation, I'm looking for stability with a locked out knee through this other foot, which is a poor position versus being straight feet, active feet, and my hips are on. It allows me to be unactive through my hip flexors because my hips are stabilizing me and keeping me upright correctly. Just so happens that I can't overextend very well if my hips are active, okay? So an unactive hip is going to necessitate a overextension issue, okay? So the other things that we see as a result of this stuff are ankle and foot issues. We see arches drop, okay? And as you see me come medially with my knee, we see the arch of my foot drop, okay? Over time, if I continue to do this, structurally my ankle starts to move medially and my arch actually will drop. The navicular bone and joint will separate and they'll drop down and I will have an inactive foot, which is just telling me that my hip is not stabilizing correctly versus a hip that lines up and we create an arch in the foot like that versus here. This also sets us up for understanding a lot of the IT band, ACL issues. So if I am medial, my ACL unwinds and I'm basically hanging off of it right now. So any more leverage this way, I'm in jeopardy of blowing that ACL. So when we see runners and people squat and the knees come in, we're actually seeing people who are literally developing into an ACL tear. Like RG3 pulling a snap, he tore his ACL by being in this position, pulling a snap back. You don't need a lot of load. You can do this just through body weight movement, but it's a major problem that we've seen because of a lot of the anterior dominance that we have. So spending time and understanding this stuff is paramount. One of the big things is getting a psoas release or getting into those hip flexors. So taking a ball like this D ball, right, and actually putting it into our gut, all right? So I want to start just below my rib cage, okay, and find my hot spots. And I would lay on this, bringing my knee out, and then finding spots where it's tough, and I've got one of those special spots right now, right? I'm into that hip flexor complex, and I'm laying here working through that tissue, getting a release out of it. Spending time here is paramount for anybody who's running, okay? It allows us to unwind all of the stuff that gets wound up and tight and overactive, because that psoas does a lot of this stuff, pulling the foot up from underneath here, and we don't want that necessarily as our indicator for pulling the foot underneath our body, okay? So we want to spend time opening up the bottoms of the feet and getting the feet more active, okay? With this, spending your day as much as you can barefoot is huge. As you notice, I'm barefoot. So I tend to spend, I would say, 80% of my day barefoot. Obviously I sleep at night barefoot, but most of my day is barefoot because I am trying to keep a connection to the ground and understand that connection to the ground. The more I'm in shoes, the more I'm buffering off. I'm literally cutting off my connection to the ground. You have 100 to 200,000 specialized nerves in the foot. They work exactly like your hands do. Yes, I know most of us, our feet don't work like our hands, but the fact is they actually do. And they do a lot of stuff that we are missing out on because we're covering them up in shoes, which is just another way of binding our feet. So if your feet, if your toes, one of the big indications is if your toes are all just smashed together and touching, you have a very inactive, inoperable, your foot's not operating correctly, okay? You're probably gonna need some help. Your doctor's probably prescribing orthotics. You've probably got other issues going on upstream because this is how mechanics work. They work from the bottom, floor on up. So if I've got a terrible foot support system here, I have something going on up top, regardless of where that's at. To where if I actually have an active foot, a wide foot here, okay, I'm actually using that foot the way it's designed. I've got a fat pad up front in this foot. I use the ball of the foot is largely my support point for doing anything, regardless of what it is. When I land running, I land on the ball of the foot. I create a spring through the arch. My ankle range of motion needs to be ideal, okay, so that I can actually get that heel down versus staying up. We see a lot of calf pain when people don't let that come down. All right, so we've got some great videos out there too, Fixing the Feet with Dr. Kelly Starrett and myself, which can help redevelop the foot and get you understanding this entire thing much better. Understanding these core to extremity things with the overextension and understanding how to stabilize, right? So setting up a program where I'm understanding how to, under some sort of exercise or duration, how to actually stabilize my spine and not having a spine that isn't stabilizing correctly, okay? One of the big things we like to use are like hollow position to understand some of this, and no, we're not in hollow position all the time, but it does prioritize the spine, where if I actually anchor my back down towards the ground, squeeze my butt, I can bring out my legs, set into a crunch, and I'm literally just using my hips and my abdominals right now to really contract and hold myself in place. My back is driven into the ground, and I can hold this for some time. I can also talk. I can breathe. Okay? A lot of people cannot do that for various reasons. The main one would be some motor control, and what we're talking about here with just the technical skill or the ability to actually stabilize correctly. So the stabilization comes into play so that we can actually understand how to stabilize that spine and be in an optimal position so that we're getting the most range of motion out of our extremities, and we're not compensating through these things. I'm in an external rotation or I am in internal rotation, okay, which would be back here, right? So I'm in internal rotation and opening that. Things like Gymnastica Natural work a lot of these positions where I'm switching back and forth, trying to get mobility out of this stuff, but trying to move through them as well, okay? The hip internal and external rotation is paramount for any runner so that we're not compensating through the process of when I pull, my hip is working around range of motion, not trying to go around. So if you've ever seen anybody running and their feet do this, something's probably going on up here, okay? There's great tools like the shoe cue, which is something that just reinforces proper position while you're walking if you are actually in shoes. It helps tremendously. It's a great tool for you understanding your connection to the ground as well. And then we have things like the Mark Pro. So I'm going over the running stuff. One of the key areas and things that we really want to deal with are, because of landing and mechanics and that anterior dominance is a lot of the quads, okay, and getting these quads flushed, using this VMO and adductor complex where everything kind of dumps into one point, we can get a good contraction out of here, and the quadriceps, right? So getting a good flush out of this, which we would just use on low intensity setting. If you have the Mark Pro Plus, the regular Mark Pro, it's just one setting. So you would set it on, and you would flush the quads for running to actually speed up the recovery, to get all this stuff, all that blood, the lymphatic fluids, all this stuff pumping through. The setting roughly for this would be anywhere from 7 to a 9 on the intensity scale. Then also for the feet, because if most of us are in shoes a lot, we're gonna need to actually get active, get some active recovery out of the feet with this thing. And the same thing with the intensity on low, anywhere from a 5 to a 9 on the low setting, and really flushing out this area so that we get the calves and this arch of the foot. So we're just flushing the entire area and getting the body back to optimal again. This really will help a lot with the implementation of a lot more of the barefoot stuff. You don't necessarily need to go run barefoot, but being barefoot a lot more, it will help your running. They've got studies that actually show this. In fact, a great idea after you're done with a run is to do a number of 100-meter little runs, sprints if you want, barefoot on the grass. Find a great grassy place that doesn't have any sharp objects in it, and run barefoot a bunch. You're gonna help stimulate that entire process, and then set something up to where we're actually flushing the legs and going through this process. I would probably do each set, so I do my right and left, and then right and left, moving through 10 to 15 minutes each side, and then switching.